What's poppin', yo? J. Cole recently released his long-awaited album, even before the offseason, which was the Falloff. And this has been teased for, I think I remember, like 6 years or something like that. It's been a very, very long time since he first drew that like hand-drawn poster or whatever it was, or like sketches of how his career was going to go. And of course, with that, and with J. Cole being one of the most commercially successful rappers, or top 3 commercially successful rappers of the 2010s with each album, alongside Drake and Kendrick Lamar, and him bowing out of that beef, or let's be real here, him pussyfooting out of that beef, where we're not going to mince words. Everyone's talking about his album streams, and instead of just like his first week sales, they jumped to the first day streams, which has become a thing in the past 4 or so years, I would say, probably around there. Everyone's giving their own opinion on it. However, Russ gave a very important take that I feel like is worth conversation, and that is around how difficult it is to release an album the traditional way. So here, the Spotify numbers account tweeted out, J. Cole received 35 million unfiltered streams on Spotify on February 6th. So most people are just looking at it like, okay, well, this amount of streams, is this good? Is this bad? How does this compare to his peers? But Russ, who's also had experience releasing music many different ways, that is a full album, the same day, same week, releasing a song a week for many years, and then I think now releasing a song per week and then packaging it together as an album at the end. And he said, wild, that after all this time, albums still have a structural problem regardless of the artist. Everyone hears the first song, then streams decrease track by track. This is what prompted my one song at a time strategy, because stuff gets buried and slept on simply due to the relationship the audience has with albums. And he would go on to say, I first noticed this in 2014, which is what made me drop one-song albums every week. Just wild to see the problem still exists. Now, this is... a person gives a take, which some agree with, but I think it's completely... Oh, shoot, this person follows me. Oh, shout out to this person. I didn't even notice that as I was reading this. But he says, this is actually just a symptom of a larger issue. People's attention span is fried and has gotten shorter over the years, which is why social media platforms like TikTok are wildly successful. Quick consumable content for instant dopamine hits. The length of songs are trending to be shorter. Back in the day, the length of songs were averaging to be 3 to 4 minutes long. Now it's averaging about 2 to 3 minutes long. And see, this is the problem. Wouldn't it be shorter than that? Because we had a period of time where we were getting a minute 30-second songs from people like X, under 2-minute songs. But the reason why I say this is incorrect is this has always been a thing. So were attention spans shorter in 2014? Because this is when Russ realized this. And this is when he was dropping on SoundCloud. And SoundCloud and Spotify, I think. And you could see it on SoundCloud because you drop an album and you see the streams. The difference is when piracy was a huge thing, as well as when traditional albums were a huge thing, all you saw was the individual album sale. So if I went to the store, I went to a FYE, for your entertainment, which I don't even know if that even exists anymore, or somebody went to a Circuit City and I buy an album. Let's say I buy 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Tryin'. And that is registered as a full album sale. And then I go home and I only play the first 3 tracks. You don't know that. You don't have that type of data into my listening behavior. And you don't have that across the masses. Now, granted, if I went all the way to a store and I spent money on an album, which at the time people were doing, I'm likely like, okay, this is the album that I have. I'm going to get the squeeze out of my payment. So I'm more likely to listen to the entire album, because if I paid $18 for a double disc CD or something like that, I'm not just going to listen to 3 songs because I feel like I'm wasting my $18. However, with streaming, it's a little bit different. But anyway, so even in back then, I would consider it that most people were unlikely, given the album. Let's say they burned the album, okay? Let's say money wasn't involved, because that's almost the experience of streaming a project. I would say that the listening habit wasn't much different. And content has always trended shorter and shorter. Like, for instance, YouTube videos are shorter than TV shows or movies. So at least when YouTube was first blowing up. Vine was the shortest we've ever had, which is 6 seconds. And Vine wasn't able to sustain itself, probably because, like, advertising, I guess, especially when you're doing 6-second videos. But generally, as humans, we want things that are quicker, easier, and more accessible. And as music scaled, the amount of music, because independent artists, bigger labels, it became easier to produce music at a high level. We just have so much music that, we can't consume 4-minute tracks. It's like with long albums. Albums used to be very long, and then they became shorter, and then they became long again because that inflates sales. But listening to a 24-track album when 2 rappers or 2 artists that you could potentially care about drop that week, that's fine. You don't have a problem with that, especially streaming-wise. But when there's 15 different artists that you kind of care about to a degree that are dropping something that week, you're like, I just don't have the time. It's impossible. We have a finite amount of time. And this has been happening, and streaming, with the data that we get from streaming, has exposed this. So we now get to see the listener behavior over time. And Russ has seen it himself. And then somebody replies and says, music is an art form. If you're worried about numbers, then you a businessman, not an artist. Well, if you're not a businessman, you can never sustain being an artist. And if it was an art form, then why would they do it for anybody else? Like, why even drop it at that point, right? Like, why do you want people to see your art? And Russ replies and says, I want people to hear my music. So putting out the music one song at a time is the best way to ensure that. The numbers are just confirmation. But the intention for me has always and will always be about getting the music heard. And if you want to get the music heard, if you drop a full album, you could have a hit in the middle of that album and you don't know it's a hit. And it won't be a hit because less people are going to listen to that track compared to something else. And some people will say, well, there are examples of albums or mixtapes where a song turned into a hit and it was later in the track list. However, a lot of the time, that song was already chosen to be the single, so the marketing was put behind it. It's very rare that just organically a song will blow up that's track, I don't know, even track 5 of an EP, let's say. Because I'm going to give you guys a very, very great example of this. It blows up by itself and becomes a huge hit. And this is another thing. Most artists, almost all artists that have had multiple hits, didn't know that one of them was going to be a hit. They were like, I didn't even think that was... Like Poland for Yachty. He didn't think that was a hit. He was just memeing around. And then he had to, did he fix up the song? Or maybe that was something else. Yachty didn't know Poland was going to be a hit. There were definitely... I can think of other... EXO Tour Life. EXO Tour Life was dropped as Love is Rage 1.5, which was part of a 3-track loose EP released on SoundCloud after Uzi had been brought on tour by The Weeknd. So if he thought that this is going to be a smash banger, this is going to be the biggest song of my career, they would have put it out on streaming services. They would have officially released it instead of just throwing it out there. Same thing with Uzi. But he didn't know. And it was 3 songs. I think it was the second song on Love is Rage 1.5. And we just loved it. And it blew up. And then they jumped behind it. So with hits, you can't really know. And Russ would go on to say, this isn't a specific genre artist issue, by the way. You can see the same pattern amongst artists of all sizes across all genres. Albums show declining listens as the track list goes on. That's listener behavior, not an artist failure. Of course, there's exceptions, big features, viral songs, etc. Yes, this is a good example with the features because let's say, I don't even know, let's say we have J. Cole and we have a Drake feature. And I think this is partially why, to combat this, certain rappers started removing features from being written on the songs or being labeled. Like a Tyler, the Creator, has done this before. I don't know if Travis Scott did this on Utopia initially, but several other artists. The first artist that I've seen do this intentionally was Tyler, the Creator. I'm not saying he is the first. That's just the first that I saw. And he's sustained that. And I think that the reason why he did this is to combat people potentially seeing a huge feature like, oh, shoot, Lil Wayne on track 13. I'm going to go skip that, listen to track 13, and then leave. He wanted people to listen to the whole project. But eventually, of course, within a day or so, all of the features are listed on a Genius and Twitter and other social platforms. But I'm going to give you guys the example right now, and that is for the biggest artist. For example, The Weeknd, right? Let's take The Weeknd and one of my favorite albums, you could call it EP, whatever you want, of The Weeknd, which is My Dear Melancholy. I interviewed, maybe 2 years ago, I interviewed a producer, DJ guy that makes mixes on TikTok. This guy, Tristan XO, he's a big Weeknd fan as well. And his experience, because if you talk about My Dear Melancholy and we open up the album and we look at the streams today, you see the same trend that Russ is talking about. The most streams were on Call Out My Name, and then they decrease. Try Me is the second song, less streams than the first. Wasted Times, less streams than the second. I Was Never There, it's got the second most streams, which we'll get into in a moment. Hurt You has a similar amount as Wasted Times. And then Privilege, less, and then Call Out My Name as an a cappella version, so that's different. But you see a decrease, and I'm willing to argue Hurt You has a little bit more streams than Wasted Times, a little bit by 5 million out of 380 plus million, because it comes after I Was Never There. So what the hell happened with I Was Never There? Well, this wasn't initially a hit, and it wasn't until a couple of years after that this would resurface as a hit. So I'm going to play you guys the clip from the interview I did with this guy right now.
And so the example that I can use is I Was Never There by The Weeknd. Sort of a more of a deeper cut at the time back in, I believe, 2022. It was definitely more of a deeper cut Weeknd song that was really only listened to by probably his core fans, and which I was one of, and which is why I knew about the song. And I posted that song, and it was doing, I believe, around 80,000 daily streams. After I had posted it, it went viral, and a bunch of other accounts, like, similar to mine, started posting it as well. And, like, all the speed pages and slowed pages, with, so many just that just post music all the time, they started posting it. And I believe within 2 weeks after I posted, within 2 to 3 weeks after I posted it initially, it went from 80,000 daily streams to, I believe, 800,000. So it 10x to the streams. And like I said, this was a deeper cut Weeknd song. And then it was like, then you went to the Weeknd Spotify page, and it was like, Blinding Lights, Starboy, I Feel It Coming, and then it was like, I Was Never There, which was, like I said, a deeper cut Weeknd song is now a essentially a hit song, a song that when played, a lot of people, at least, in the TikTok universe are going to be like, oh, like, I know what this song is. I know who it's by. I know the name of it. And, it eventually got to the point where it was doing over 1 million streams.
So that's exactly what happened. So in 2022, this is 3-4 years after this project releases, this becomes the most streamed. If you accumulate all of the other streams of the other songs, like Try Me, Wasted Times, Hurt You, and Privilege, I don't even think it's as much. It's probably right at the amount or right under I Was Never There. So I Was Never There is a hit. But for the first couple of years, it was not a hit. And it wasn't a hit until he shined a different spotlight on it, gave it like a remix, and then it caught motion. And then the Spotify algorithm worked where it was like, okay, people are really, really coming to this song and looking it up. And they're coming from TikTok. I don't know if the integration was there yet from the add to Spotify playlist on TikTok to Spotify. But regardless, if they saw a lot of activity on the song, they would recommend the song a lot more. And then now you've got one of the biggest Weeknd hits, which, as Tristan said, during that period of time, this was just under Blinding Lights, The Hills, his biggest hits of all time. That's what this song was underneath. So that just proves Russ's point, which is even in a 7-track EP by the biggest pop star of our generation, you could have a hit buried in there that you didn't even know. And because of the way that albums are consumed by the listener, it will never see the light of day and get the love and appreciation that it's supposed to get. Because a ton of people don't even listen to albums. So we're talking about people that are listening to albums. A ton of people just listen to songs and playlists. So they get robbed of the experience of listening to probably one of their favorite songs ever, this song. And that's because, yeah, you could say it's their fault for not listening to albums. Sure. But the point is that they were exposed to a song that they loved, and they would have never been exposed to it if it wasn't a single. But what is The Weeknd supposed to do? Constantly just release singles? It's such a difficult question for an artist that's putting together a body of work too, because artists that create album first and they're like, okay, I'm going to create an album, this is how it's going to look, to ask them to fragment that into a week by week thing, and it's very difficult to get attention for things, and just the way that the label system is engineered to release an album, it makes it so hard. And this is where I feel for artists on this, because there's nothing worse than, well, I'm being hyperbolic, but it must be very difficult to experience that of like, damn, no matter what I do, no matter how good of an album I make, no matter what, my first track is always going to be a lot more listened to than my later track, unless there's like a hit or a big feature. But yeah, I think this is a good conversation that should be had. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Hopefully we can have good discussion about it. It's like kind of one of my favorite things to discuss. And yeah, let me know. I'll be in there in the comments as always. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you enjoyed. And I'm going to see y'all in the next one.